The Clone Army was the main force of the Republic during the Clone Wars and would have become the key enforcers of Palpatine's early empire. But what would happen if the Clone Army was never created? So, the Clone Army was engineered in secret on Kamino without the knowledge and consent of the Republic by Master Sifo Dyas, which was then hijacked by Darth Sidious to use at a later date to take over the Republic. But for this scenario, we're going to say that the cloning facilities don't exist. So, what happens? Well, it makes the Clone Wars, or whatever this conflict would be called, far more complex. You see, the Clone Army really was the most convenient army ever. Just as galactic tensions reach a breaking point, the Republic have a potential limitless amount of soldiers at their disposal. But without this army being pulled out the bag, when tensions rose to the level that they did and the separatists inevitably started declaring independence, they would need to assemble an army very quickly to combat the separatist threat. The Republic doesn't at this point have a standing army. Nearly every system in the Republic would have some form of military, but not one solitary army, so if the Republic did combine all of its military strength from all of the systems, then they would have a formidable force, but not exactly. You see, perhaps the biggest perk of the Clone Army was that it was made up of essentially one man. This meant that they were the same, they could communicate, they essentially fought the same, it was completely uniform, if you will. But if the Republic's army was made up of every different system, then it would be a logistical nightmare. Thousands of different dialects, disagreements between species, different cultures, the list goes on. Essentially it would be an army and it would be at a colossal disadvantage to the Separatists' droid army. There's also another great deal of issues with this. For example, actual recruited soldiers need paying. Training would be far more complex, and maintaining a constant supply of fresh troops would be near impossible. However, there's a slightly morbid perk to this. You see, one of the biggest problems with the Clone Wars was that both armies were essentially disposable. They were engineered, and so long as numbers could be recuperated, then the war could continue. However, if the armies were made of actual people, then not only would the Republic have to be far less disposable with their troops, but also with actual citizens of the Republic dying in the masses, then support for the war would waver and many would try to seek peace. So realistically, in my eyes, it's possible that if the Clone Army was not available, firstly, the chances of the Republic winning the war would be very low, but even if they could hold back the Separatists, then there'd be a huge amount of pressure to end the war as quickly as possible, so it's very likely it wouldn't escalate as much as it did, which in the long run is good. Now, let's talk about the other huge difference not having the clones in the Republic army would have. It would make it almost impossible for Palpatine to take over how he did. You see, Palpatine had complete control over the clones, not just officially, but the inhibitor chip in their brains literally made it impossible for them to disobey certain orders. They were effectively programmed to serve. So when Palpatine said the Jedi were betraying the Republic, the clones followed protocol and killed them off. But that doesn't work if the army's made up of actual free-thinking people. So Palpatine giving the order to arrest or kill the Jedi and take power wouldn't be successful. The Republic's army would simply be able to refuse the order. Granted, giving that kind of an order would cause absolute chaos, however many of the soldiers would just refuse to carry it out. As well as this, even if Palpatine did somehow manage to become Emperor, his rule would be far less successful, or definitely not the same at least. The Empire is ran as a police state more or less, and having all these Republic soldiers turn into his enforcers would simply not happen. Instead, Palpatine would have to rely on propaganda and winning over the hearts and minds of the people to be able to succeed in his plans, which would be very difficult to do. Ultimately, I believe that in the absence of the Clone Army, the Clone Wars would have been far shorter. The Republic would have not been able to stand against the might of the Separatist war machine, and would have been forced to grant them their independence. As well as this, I highly doubt Palpatine would manage to come to power, and would likely be discovered and killed by the Jedi. But what do you think? Do you think this would be good or bad? Please put your opinions and scenarios below, because I find this to be a pretty interesting subject and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already for more content, and I'll see you next time.